Hi, everyone. I'm nearly at the 40,000 word deadline for my third book for Author versus AI, which is called The Wreakfast Club. I'll post on my website tonight how high I can go in my word count. In the meantime, here's an excerpt from the book as promised. This is from the first chapter in the book. The main character, Steno, has returned home after book 1 ended to find herself hailed as a hero in the mythic community. Here's what happens next. Chapter 1. Steno gritted her teeth. How many times did she have to tell the community leaders she didn't want a statue erected in her honor? It was a terrible irony for a Gorgon like her, since every day she tried her hardest not to turn anyone into stone accidentally. Yet they wanted to create a stone figure for her on purpose? But talking to a committee intent on doing good was like talking to a mountain. Not a lot of reaction when she said anything, just a cold, blank response. That night, when she complained at her local pub, the Pretty Pay Show, her friend Kairos told her to just ride the wave of popularity that she was experiencing. He was the bartender and a 9-headed hydra, and he tended to see a lot with those 18 eyes of his. Let them put up a statue. After all, what other mythic has saved the whole magical kingdom from getting thrown into prison? Not to mention, you also witnessed King Robert's death. Witnessed, yes. But the rumors going around about me and King Robert? She didn't elaborate, but Kairos would know what she was talking about. She shook her head and knocked back her drink, putting the cup back on the bar. Shortly afterward, it was filled again. Kairos shrugged. Either way, your actions are considered legendary, which is saying something in a neighborhood of mythics that are, quite literally, part of numerous legends. Besides, he added, when's the last time anyone other than your friends have been glad to see you? He gave her a wink before turning his head away to serve another customer. Huh. Put that way, perhaps she shouldn't object too strenuously to be hailed as a so-called hero in the community. Even among the mythics, she wasn't exactly Miss Popularity, since she had a power that almost none of the magical community were immune to. She guessed it would suck to spend the rest of an immortal life as a lump of rock. Another day, another dollar. The next evening she got home from work in time to eat supper with her children before sending them off to bed. I love you, Vasya, she said, kissing her oldest daughter's forehead. Love you, Domna and Arita. They gave her a hug and she squeezed them tightly. There were several times on the road when she had thought she might not make it back to them, and that had been a terrible feeling. She might be immortal, but there were still things that could be done to immortals that were almost as permanent as death. It had been a month since she had returned home from the mission, and things seemed to have settled down nicely. As soon as Kairos opened up his bar again, he had offered her free drinks for the rest of her life, with a very cautious limit of 2 per night. It made it hard to stay away, which was sort of the point. You bring in more business when you're here, her friend confessed shortly afterward. I can afford the loss of 2 drinks a night. Steno glanced around. She supposed she had noticed the bar was extra full these days whenever she was around. Whereas it used to be mythics stood too deep at the bar, now there seemed hardly any place to turn around anymore. And so many of them seemed to know her. They were constantly shouting out greetings from across the room. It was as if everyone in the bar knew her name. Pretty soon you'll have to expand, she told Kairos, nodding at the packed house. There'll be a line out the door. He grinned, exposing very sharp teeth. One can only hope. Her friends Fortuna and Waban had saved their usual table near the front door, but there was a noticeable absence. Hey, where's Peterson? She asked as she set down her drink on the table and sat down. Fortuna's nose was buried in a bowl on the table, and she was lapping up a beer. Waban had 3 wooden mugs in front of him that looked small in his claws when he picked them up. He popped one into his mouth, mug and all, and crunched it into oblivion. Kairos, she knew, had started adding the cups to his tab every night. Don't know, Fortuna said. She paused drinking to lick her shoulder. No word. That was strange. Sometimes Fortuna might be out and about of an evening and not alert them that she wouldn't be there. Wampus cats seemed to have the same wandering gene as house cats. But Peterson was steady as a rock. He was usually the first one at the bar to save their table. But Steno shrugged it off. If he didn't show up tomorrow, she'd go visit his home and see if something had happened to him. Of course, she wasn't too worried. Zombies couldn't die a second time, so unless something catastrophic had occurred, like an asteroid hitting him, it was unlikely that he had gotten himself into too much trouble. She was still thinking about Peterson when she got to her job the next day. The carpentry company she worked for had been hired to revamp a temple in the human part of the city, so it was a bit of a trek to get across town. If she wanted to waste coin, she could have hired a cart or horse, but she had taxes to pay, and that was an extravagance. No, her own 2 feet were good enough. When she arrived, she was a bit puzzled to see her boss waiting for her, but no one else. Her co-workers would normally be here already, so it was strange to see Bardo standing there by himself. Her boss was half merman, half human, and had always seemed a bit embarrassed about his duality. He tended to wear a hat every day over the scales that covered his bald head, and he often sported gloves on his hands to hide the webbing. Not unusual to cover your hands in the carpentry profession, especially when dealing with wood and splinters, but pretty strange when the middle of summer rolled around. However, it was the middle of winter now, even though they hadn't yet had a snowfall. The ground was frozen below the surface, so Stheno was glad to be working on the interior of a building for once. Outside was much less pleasant. "Stheno," he said when he saw her. The way his face was shining with dampness was a dead giveaway that something was wrong. "I'm sorry." "Sorry?" There was a scuffling sound of movement, and then her arms were grabbed from behind. "Hey, what?" she said right before chains were wound around her body. A man appeared in her line of sight. He had ridden around from behind her. "You are under arrest by order of the Queen," he announced in an unusually nasal voice. The visor of his helmet was up, and she could see his mustache quiver with every word. Stheno tested the strength of the chains. Magically augmented, as she might have guessed. Ordinary chains she could break. "On what charge?" she asked, although she had a sinking suspicion she already knew. The man managed to look down his nose at her while simultaneously not looking directly at her at all. Pretty impressive feat, actually. His next words confirmed her fears and made her stomach sink into her boots. "For the murder of Bartholomew Oliver Odin Roberts II, former King of Globia." If you like this, stay tuned for my next book project, which will be starting on Monday. Next week, I'm going to switch things up a bit and delve into the world of wannabe superheroes, starting tomorrow. See you then.